Good morning and happy Friday. It's been a few weeks. Unfortunately, I've been traveling, had some family things go on, had to attend a funeral, and then traveling for work. So I have not been able to jump on the live on Friday mornings at 11 a.m. But I'll be here this week. I'll be here next week and weeks following. So certainly looking forward to seeing you guys. And today we're going to talk about a tool that I use to help me with the coaching that I do. I will use a tool. The tool's called PDP. It's from an organization out in Colorado Springs, PDP Global. I had the wonderful opportunity of spending time out in Colorado Springs a couple of weeks ago. I was actually in the air a couple of weeks ago during this time, so I was unable uh, to conduct a live. But this tool is, in my opinion, one of the best tools that is out there. It's a 98% accuracy rating. It has a tons of scientific data backing it. It has a ton of statistical analysis, which you can view and check out. And I am looking forward to, in the coming weeks, sharing more about this. So if anyone is out there yet and could give me a thumbs up or just comment that this live is actually reaching out there, I'd appreciate that. Just give me a thumbs up will be great. But today we're going to talk about something that was regarding the article that I wrote on Wednesday. And this is going to be likely what I'm going to do in the future is whatever my article is on or regarding Wednesday, I will do that on Friday in the live. And this Wednesday's article was about what we call the silent drain. And this is referring to the energy drain that your employees, your leaders may be having. And we know the data is overwhelming and it shows a lot to this point that post COVID, engagement in organizations are down significantly. The happiness index, which Gallup just released earlier this week, is not great. I think here in the US, we're barely in the top 20 for happiness. It may even be a little worse than that. But things aren't going in the right direction, things are going in the wrong direction. And as leaders, we have the ability to do that. So I'm going to take a look at my text here real quick and make sure that I'm actually going live on Facebook. And it appears that that's good. I am going live there, which is fantastic. Double check here that this is happening on LinkedIn, which is fantastic. Whoops, didn't mean to hit that, but good. I'm going live there, and I'm going to check LinkedIn real quick just to make sure, since this is the first time I've done this in a few weeks. Excellent. So I am on, which is great. So we're going to jump in. And once again, this is about the tool called PDP. It is a behavioral assessment, if you will. They don't like using the word assessment, but if I called it a behavioral survey, nobody would know what that meant. Everyone knows what an assessment means. This is not a personality test. It's not. I have used most of them in corporate America. I've used Cultural Index, Predictive Index. I've used Hogan. I've used Colby. I've used DISC. I've used all of them. And what I can say about PDP is that I have used it for going on 8 years now. And the reason that I have used it, one is it's simple. It takes, I think the median time to take it is like 5.1 minutes. You're responding to words and what those words mean to you, which then in turn creates the behavior profile for you. And as I mentioned earlier, it's 98% accurate. So it is a phenomenal tool. It is science backed. PDP Global has been around for 50 years. They're now starting to market the product. So, Brent, when you watch this, keep the marketing coming. Help us get the word out because it is a tremendous tool. And inside of this tool, there are a lot of things that you're going to learn about your individual employees, your leaders, et cetera. Now, let me jump in and talk to you about, let me set this up. So I was coaching Steven. Okay. We'll call him Steven. It's not his name. It's not his real name, to protect Steven. But I was coaching this guy named Steven. And the leader asked, said, hey, there's something going on. I can't quite figure it out. Steven's doing a pretty good job. We really like him a lot, but we want to put some time and energy into developing Steven. And so I start coaching Steven. And the first thing that I do when I am working with someone is I require them to complete the PDP behavioral survey. And that assessment is going to tell me a lot. Then I put that inside of my Leadership Squared framework in the content and take that information and then create a coaching pathway for the individual. And so this particular individual, when I was able to review Steven's PDP, there were some things that really jumped out on me. First and foremost, I was able to identify what are Steven's key behaviors. Thank you for the thumbs up. I was able to not only identify the key behaviors, but I was also able to determine what his stress environment looked like. How is he really showing up? So we were able to look through some of those things. It also talks about like how others see you, but I'm not going to touch on that today. But what was alarming to me was the energy drain that was taking place, the stress that Steven was under. Now, look, most of us, as stated, post-COVID, all the data shows that we are a very stressed environment. Like our country is not doing well in this, which is negatively impacting the workplace. So when we look at this and we look at PDP and we take this holistically, what I determined was that this is what was happening to Steven, is that we call it the silent drain. And what really was happening to Steven at this point was that Steven was really, truly experiencing some things, but he wasn't saying anything about it, right? He was staying silent. And so what we're going to show you is what that looks like. And the first thing when I showed Steven, I said, look, man, I said, this is like unusual. I've been doing this for 8 years and I have not seen someone's profile look quite like yours. So let's talk about what's going on. And what I was able to learn through looking at Steven's basic natural behaviors and then looking at his stressor environment was he was in conflict with what was natural to him. Overall, he was performing decently. He had, 5 or 6 people that he was leading. He was saying that he loved his job, but what he really meant was that he loved the people in his job. He didn't necessarily like the things that he was doing. And what Steven said to me was like, Clegg, look, everyone feels this way, right? And I said, no, absolutely. Like everyone doesn't feel this way. And you shouldn't feel this way too. So I showed it to him. I was able to visually show him his PDP and stressor environment. And that was tough, right? For him to see that, because he got pretty emotional and understood like how he was really feeling. And this is why I say constantly to my clients, stop hiring for skills only to fire on behaviors. Because typically what's going on inside your individual employees or your leaders is that something is happening. And we often don't know what those things are. And we typically hire people because they have a certain skill set, not because they have the desired behaviors for that role. And that's when we get into what is natural, because we all have a way that is natural of how we were born. As I tell people when I do their PDPs, it's how God built you. That is your natural behavior, your natural environment. But we all have to work in an environment and do some things that aren't natural to us. And that's okay. But we have to understand when we do those things, there's naturally going to be an energy drain. For us to, as an example, I have a fairly high level of dominance. For me to be less dominant, to be more supportive, that requires energy for me to do what is opposite of being dominant. Or as an example, with my extroversion, if I'm a pretty outgoing dude and I'm required to be more reserved and not be as outgoing, that's tough for me because I want to speak, I want to talk, I want to engage with other people when things are going on, or if I'm in meetings or in certain social settings. So that requires me to respond differently to my natural behaviors. And so when Steven goes, man, like, doesn't everyone feel this way? And I go, no, everyone doesn't feel this way. This is not natural. What I'm showing him was not natural. And and so that was a very good point. I'm going to enlarge this a little bit. And something that I like to share, right, is that Stephen behind the scenes was mentally and physically exhausted. And so we went to something that we call his trait pairs. Now, keep in mind the role that Stephen is in is requiring him to have the behaviors that aren't natural to him. And I'll show you in a second what that looks like. And so in this, and some people have one or two trait pairs. Some people, like myself, have six. And so it's important to understand how we fit into the organizations. One, what's required of us inside of our role. And then two, what are those natural behaviors that are a fit or not a fit for that particular role. And so in this particular case, these are Stephen's three, and one of them is dependable and productive, which means that Stephen works at a steady pace. Okay. He values consistency. He wants to do the same thing over and over again. He wants and needs structure. He, when he is in an environment that is very outgoing, that is less structured, less rules based, more independent thinking, doing something different every day that's not consistent, that's going to cause Stephen some energy drain. And so much so that in this particular case, in this environment that Stephen's in, his role actually requires him to have a significantly high sense of urgency. But Stephen's pace is a much slower, much more methodical point. And so when you have someone with their basic natural self in an environment that goes against their natural self, inevitably that's going to cause stress. It's going to cause anxiety. And we don't typically measure for these things in the workplace. So that's the first trait pair. The second is Stephen's an internal processor, which means that he needs time to consider things, right? He needs time to observe. He needs time. He wants to think through these things. And so with Stephen being an internal processor, but his role requires him to make decisions on the fly. People are coming at him every single day asking questions. Hey, this happened with this client. What do you want me to do? And he doesn't have time to process those. So when that happens, guess what's happening to Stephen? It is draining Stephen. He's not comfortable. So he's not able to give the best responses that he would give if he took 5 and said, hey, hang on, let me discern what is happening here. And then the third is we call cautious requires proof. Stephen is wired to slow down and examine the level of risks. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can be in a very fast-paced, unpredictable environment, which is what Stephen's in. So this level of urgency, this level of movement, this level of decision-making are all things that really give Stephen this level of anxiety that is not healthy. And over a sustained period of time, and by the way, Stephen has been in this role for almost 4 years. So when I look at that and I saw Stephen's behavior or his stressor environment, I was like, whoa. And I even said to him, I was like, you're a unicorn. I've never seen something this across the board. He was just extremely stressed, had very little energy left to even complete the day. So I can't imagine what Steven was going through until he told me that when he got home, it was like, I couldn't be present with my family. I couldn't be present with my kids. I didn't want to go see their activities after work. I'm just not a good dad. And that has no bearing. He's out of energy. This is a human response that he has. So when we look at all of these trait pairs, it's important to understand why these things are happening, right? And so it's not that he's a bad guy. It's not that he was failing by any stretch of the imagination. And by the way, if anyone is watching this and has questions, please go ahead and type your question into the comments section. I apologize I didn't say that earlier, but I'd be happy to answer any questions as you guys jump in to the live. And please give me a thumbs up if I'm still out there and still trucking. I just want to make sure, because a couple times that I've done these streams, they've been, Facebook has knocked me off, and one time LinkedIn did. So, but I'll keep going for those of you watching the replay. Please feel free to I'll go ahead and put my calendar up. If you guys want to know more information, you can reach me through my Calendly. You can schedule there, and I'll certainly be happy to talk to you about PDP and how I use it in my coaching practice. And it's the tip of the spear for all of this that I do. So as we keep going regarding Steven, I'm telling a story right now about someone who was extremely stressed at work, had a ton of anxiety about that he wasn't doing well, that he wasn't showing up to his family at home because work was just absolutely killing him on a day-to-day basis. But he still said that he liked his job. But as I mentioned, what he really was saying is that he liked the people that he worked with. He didn't necessarily like the job because he thought that the way that he felt, everybody feels that way. Everybody hates work. And unfortunately, that's not true. Like, I love my work. I love what I do. And there's even times on the weekends where Kelly, my wife, will say, Clegg, like, dude, like, can you just chill? But I love what I do. I love learning. I love learning about people. I love working with people. I love helping people. All these things that come through in my work and in my efforts, I enjoy. So in this particular case, Steven was just extremely unaware of that. So now let me show you what this looks like, okay, where burnout really does live, okay? For Steven, in his natural self, how God built him, he's very steady, right? He's extremely deliberate. He's process oriented and very reflective on the things that he does on a day-to-day basis. He's very reflective with his people. He's very reflective in how he responds to others. But this gap is where burnout happens. In his role, if you take a look at rapid fire, very quick environment, really reactive type of environment, it required him to make decisions on the fly. It also required him to make decisions publicly in their daily huddles. And with him being very process oriented, with him having to understand that they need answers, they, meaning his employees, need answers in the moments to go back to the clients, he wanted to take a time out to say, hang on, let me discern what's happening. And that's not the environment that he lives in. So that causes an extreme amount of stress and anxiety for Steven. And over time, that's what leads to burnout, because he has to work at this pace that is not comfortable for him. But to him, it's like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. And unfortunately, that's not exactly the way things have to be. But as leaders and founders and owners and key decision makers in organizations, we need to know these things about our people. And PDP will help us do that. And PDP is a behavior assessment. For those of you that are just joining, is a behavior assessment that I use as the tip of the spear for all of my coaching. It is the first stop. And inside of that, then we learn about the individual, what's natural to them, how they show up to other people, that external self-awareness that only, by the way, 10 to 15% actually have. I mean, we all believe that we're very self-reflective and introspective, but the problem is we don't understand how we show up to other people, because the only way that we can get that information is by asking them. by getting feedback. And it's really difficult for people to judge us, right? So when you realize that 90 to 95% of people actually don't have external self-awareness, it becomes pretty eye-opening, right? We'll keep trucking. Now, see if I can make this off this real quick. So this situation with Steven is not rare. It's really not. This situation, Steven is, while I called him a unicorn, there are other people that are burning out in your organization, but yet they're still performing on a day-to-day basis. But like I said, Steven gets home. He's not present with his wife. He's not present with his kids. He's worn out. And Steven just thought that's just the way things were. And most of us, I think, fall into this gap. So when we look at this, there are Stevens everywhere. I would guarantee that some of your key players right now are like this. So what are the things that we can do? Well, one, we have to focus on what are the outcomes that we want for the Stevens of the world? Well, we want them to be less stressed. Well, that means we have to match their natural behaviors with our workplace. And Steven really is everywhere. There are people that are burned out from work and can't function in the other areas of their lives. And we know in the US, it is getting worse every single year. So there are ways that we can figure this out. And using the PDP behavior assessment is one of those ways. And it's 98% accurate, as I mentioned. But these outcomes are avoidable. We have to understand that they are avoidable. And when you do figure out how to fit the behaviors of the workplace with the behaviors required of Steven, you're going to see a different type of employee. You're going to see when they get to work in their natural environment, you're going to see sustained growth because that changes everything. And so it's important for us to find those things. So before, right, we figure out those things, people are going to be missing targets. They're going to get flagged for performance issues, right? In this particular case, in the conversation, the CEO was really concerned. Once I started working with Steven, the CEO confided and said, honestly, Clegg, I was concerned that I was going to have to let Steven go because things were getting missed. Things were behind on deadlines. And that's because of the pace and the environment that Steven was in. But after it, right, and Steven's role, by the way, got changed. And Steven is a much happier employee, and he's able to add more value because of that change. And that's an important piece. So as you're joining in, as people are jumping in, please, if you have any questions, throw it in the chat. I'll see that. Happy to answer any questions there. But you're going to see process improvements when you get people working in their natural environment. But the problem is with job descriptions that they are all skills-based. And I'll show this again, right? We hire for skills only to fire on behaviors because people aren't a match. I'm sure that we've all hired someone that didn't do well. Maybe we had to let them go and they went somewhere else and did extremely well. They were fired in our workplace, but then they go elsewhere. Or you hired a top producer from another workplace, from another organization, and then they got to your organization and they didn't do the same type of work. And we immediately go, oh man, they were lying in the interview. The references weren't great. You're looking at all these things to blame, when in reality, it wasn't a behavior fit. Now, we talk about culture fits all the time. What we're really saying is this person a behavior fit? And that's the big key difference. Okay. So when we get alignment, everything improves, process improves, output, right? The outcomes improve. The CEO is able to see the value. The role was built for this individual. Okay. These are key differences that I want to make sure that we're all looking for. Now, the last thing that I will say here is there's a couple things that I think we need to look at. One, I've got another cohort that's starting May 26th. I got a couple people on the waiting list for that were unable to join my March cohort that starts on Monday. But chances are you have a Steven on your team, and going through the process with me, taking PDP first, then putting them into the leader lens, which is essentially my framework that will give you a coaching blueprint for that individual. You can do this for one, you can do this for as many people as you want. I've got clients that I've done this for hundreds of people in their organization. I've got clients where I've done this with one person. So it doesn't require you having to have a bunch of different ones. The more you have, the more people can start using common language, which is really important. So in May, my next cohort, I technically have one spot remaining for my current cohort. If you have someone on your team that is stressed, that you know is stressed or not performing to the level that you need them, certainly talk to me. Feel free to go ahead and schedule some time with me. As I'll go ahead and put my Calendly back up again. But on May 26th, I have another cohort that is coming up, and one that's starting on Monday, as mentioned. But chances are you have a Steven on your team. And if you're just logging in, you're seeing this, there'll be the replay available on all of my channels on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. Please go ahead and feel free to log in and take a look at this. If there's anything that you need or have questions on, I'm going to hang on for a couple of moments. You can certainly feel free to drop your question in the chat. I'd be happy to share that with you. But if you are, see some people are now just joining, the replay will be available. Don't sweat it. On all of my socials, it will be available, and be happy to share with you. There's my Calendly. If you want to talk about PDP and review how you could use that in your workplace, it's a game changer, guys. I could use any assessment. I'm not bound to any particular one, but I have used PDP for 8 years, and I've used them all because it's by far the most accurate. It's the simplest, and it's something that doesn't require a PhD to understand. And it's something that I use in my coaching practice every single day. So last but not least, there's a calendar that you can get scheduled on my Calendly. And my next cohort is coming up May 26th. I really appreciate you guys tuning in or watching the replay. I love the messages that I get from you guys. Really happy to answer any of those. Feel free to DM me if you don't want to ask any questions publicly. But looking forward to seeing you guys next week. Have a great weekend. Spring is here in the Southeast. We're super excited about that. Not excited about the pollen, but I appreciate all of your time, whether you watch this live, checking in, or you watch this on the replay. I'll see you next Friday at 11 a.m., and we'll catch up then. Thanks, guys.